Hey, team, welcome back to another incredible episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell, and today I am joined by my very good friend, Marlene Eick with the Ohio Farm Bureau. Marlene, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so fun to do fun things with friends.
It is, and we were just recollecting how long it's been.
Yeah.
And I don't know
Yeah.
if we dare share the numbers. We're like, okay, it's been a couple of decades since we
Yeah. Let's
started
just
this
say
journey.
it's longer than we had thought it had been when we actually did the math.
Exactly, exactly. So, man, well, so let's get into it. You get the same opening question that everybody gets. What does it mean for you, Marlene, to be intentional?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question because I knew this was going to come up. And I think for me, based on how I am wired, it's really easy for me just to get heads down in the weeds, thinking about, checking things off my list. And so,
Hmm.
what it means to be intentional for me is to make sure that I am making space for looking up, like head up, looking out, getting a bigger picture viewpoint, whether that comes to the programs I'm helping to lead or my team, and just making sure I spend time like looking up and not always having my head down. And so there's a lot of intentionality for me because of how I'm wired around that.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like it because when I think like the picture in my head is always like me looking out through my scope or through some binoculars at like
Hmm.
what's on the horizon, where do I want to go next, what's coming up next, and
Yeah.
it's when I actually have time to sit back and think like from a refreshed point of view, where am I going instead of being in it all the time that I can actually make intentional progress, I guess.
Hmm. And it's really tempting again, especially if you're wired like me, like on Gallup's, like Clifton Strengths. I'm a discipline, I'm a focus, I'm an achiever. And
Yep.
so my talent themes are such that I want to just keep my head down. I want to cross things off my list. I want to get that quick hit of feeling like I accomplished something for the day. And so for me,
Mhm.
the temptation is just to keep like grinding it out, doing the next thing. And so for me, I have to schedule time for that intentionality. Like I have to schedule time for big picture planning, for deeper thinking. And like you said, that looking out, like looking through the scope, like what's coming next. Am I thinking critically about the bigger picture? And in fact, my team and I just put some time on the calendar every couple of months to make sure as a team
Mhm.
we were making space for that, because all of us on my team are of the sort that we're just going to get the task done, and unless we make space to really intentionally, right, make that time, we find that we might not be acting with intention throughout the year.
I think that's a takeaway for those listening right now. Like you have to time block and
Yeah.
actually, and then make yourself
Yeah.
adhere to the time block, of course.
Sure. Yeah. And because of the way I'm wired, if I put something on my calendar, I do feel beholden to it. So it
Hmm.
works for me to, schedule that out. And now I feel like that's also something I want to achieve and get done. So
Yeah,
it feels good.
beautiful, good stuff. Well, Marlene, give us a little bit
Yeah.
of background on you. What do you do for Ohio Farm Bureau? What's all entailed in this?
Yeah, well, I serve as Senior Director of Leadership Development for the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation, which I think probably for most of the listeners are familiar, with Farm
Mhm.
Bureau, and as a membership association and the work that our organization does to serve then its members across Ohio. I came to Ohio Farm Bureau less than a year ago, and so I started in July. And so, in a lot of ways, I'm very new to Farm Bureau as a staff member. Obviously, was a very involved member and volunteer
Mhm.
previously, so I had a lot of experience with many of the programs I get to lead now as a participant before and
Sure.
now on the staff side. So it's been really fun. Prior to being at Ohio Farm Bureau, I had the privilege of being on the team at Ohio Corn and Wheat Growers and really enjoyed being on that team. And previous to that, actually spent about a decade as a solopreneur or small business owner or whatever you might want to call me.
Hmm.
Um, and also enjoyed that time, which is kind of when you and I got to
Yeah.
collaborate a little bit more too.
Yeah, yeah. Those were the good old days back when we
Yeah.
were all scrapping and
Yeah,
trying to make a go of it. I'm still
that's
scrapping.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah. No, that.
And, even further back in my background, I grew up
Mhm.
on a farm, a family farm in Northwest Ohio, and I
Nice.
love those ties still. My parents and brothers and their families are very engaged. in that family farm. My husband BJ and I now live near Worcester, and we have a small farm as well. And so I love that connection, that direct connection to production
Mhm.
agriculture, in the way that BJ and I do that, and also a connection to the way that my parents and brothers are doing that, which just always keeps me very grounded
Mhm.
in the work that I get to do at Farm Bureau.
Mhm. Good stuff. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I've always been a big Marlene fan, and I'm glad that things are going so well for you guys, and you're doing some great things for Ohio Farm Bureau. Let's pivot a little bit though, and just kind
Yeah.
of talk about um, culture building and team
Yep.
building and things like this. You mentioned your team a number of times. I think a lot of times we're generally talking to small to mid-sized businesses and maybe some different challenges there, but I'm sure there's also some similarities. So as it
Hmm.
pertains to building team and creating culture and trying to get your team all showing up for the meeting so we can sit down and get on the same page like we talked about, what are some things that are top of mind for you in terms of challenges and opportunities in that arena?
Yeah, so the team that I'm privileged to be a part of includes three other fantastic individuals plus myself. And again, being newer to
Mhm.
this role, I came on board less than a year ago. And interestingly enough, one of those three other folks has been with the organization for literally 30 years. So she knows the ins and outs of everything and has been, incredible to get to work with. And the other two, while they're not brand new to Farm Bureau, they were very new to their current role.
Mm,
So three of the four people when I joined, were less than a year into their current role, either with the organization or in their role. And so we were all in this place of transition of figuring out not only each other, but what the heck our jobs were and
mhm.
what we were supposed to be doing. And then we also had Julie, who was very steadfast and could help us fill in the gaps, which was,
Sure.
so helpful. So in terms of like culture building and how do we build our team and how do we do that, a lot of it was and continues to be how much are we willing to be transparent and vulnerable with each other in
Mhm.
sharing who we are, what we're good at, what we're liking, what is
Yeah.
going well, what's not going well, and being really honest with each other as we have those conversations. I'm still learning how to do that. I'm learning how to facilitate that among our whole team, too.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I'm just being reminded all the time that if we can be honest with each other, vulnerable with each other, transparent with each other, then the culture builds itself.
Yeah.
And also, we're going to be able to move more quickly into this space of, to go back to the idea of team forming, like forming, storming, norming, performing, right? We can
Mhm.
get more quickly get to that norming and performing
Yeah.
phase once we've kind of figured each other out. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we're there yet because,
Yeah.
again, less
It
than a
takes
year
time.
into this, and I think it takes time.
It takes
Yeah,
time to formulate,
yeah,
time to get to the norming and the performing for sure.
that's right.
And
Yeah,
I'm glad you brought it up first because I'm usually one of the like in the interview I brought it up a number of times over 150 recordings
yeah,
because it's it's something that I look for in any time that we're coaching a team, working with a team, or even doing it within our own team. And we're just a small team of four people too, right? And our full
yep,
time staff will probably be six before the end of the year, but that's kind of where we're at right now. And every time you add a new person, you still have to go back through that phase of now you're
hmm,
forming, and there's guess what? There's going to be a storm at some point again. And the thing that gives me comfort these days is understanding from an intentional leadership perspective that you actually have like there are optional storms and then there are
mm,
required storms, right? And so as the team lead, I have the ability to curate some sort of task or some sort of challenge or something that we're going to work on overcoming together, right? That creates sort of a necessary mountain to climb, right? So
yeah,
maybe in my business, it's a revenue goal, but that revenue goal is not just a revenue goal. That means we have to create the capacity internally to be able to handle the work that comes with it, right? And so that's an optional mountain. And
hmm,
everybody's got to do their part,
hmm,
right? I've got to go sell it, and John's got to be able to handle the client services and the coaching, and Ani's got to be able to handle the logistics, and Christine's got to be able to handle the executive coaching. So it's all the things. So there's the optionals, but then there's the required storm happens when we ignore
yeah,
that first one or
yeah,
don't choose to be intentional with it. And we get too
right,
heads down
yeah,
and all the things like you were talking
that's
about,
right, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, I mean, come back and ask me in a few years how I'm
yeah,
doing, right? Because like you said, it takes some time to
yeah,
to kind of get there and then to see, is this working? Is this not working? Did I create enough of a storm for us to figure out some of those pieces?
hmm
And in our team's function, we lead all the programming, many of the programming aspects for Ohio Farm Bureau. So when it comes to
hmm
Collegiate Farm Bureau, YFNR, our Leadership Development Academy, all the pieces.
yep,
And so those programs are happening every year, right? On a very regular basis, all the things are happening. So in some ways, it's like that stuff coming at us, whether we're ready for it or not, because it's going to happen, and figuring out some of those pieces. But gosh, yeah, now I'm sort of pondering, Mark, if I'm
yeah,
am I setting us up for success? Well,
yeah.
we'll have to come back and
Can
ask me
I,
that a couple
yeah,
of years.
can I make it more challenging?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What can we manufacture in order to have a scenario that lets us go through that to get to get to that space? It's really wise.
Yeah, I just I've avoided and hidden from that storm so many times
Yeah.
now over the last 20 years of my career, almost 25 really. If you go back to my FFA state officer days, right? And
Right.
it's almost like, well, we're not.
Don't say that was 25
It
years
was
ago.
I
How
got
just
elected
I
25 years
no,
ago to
no,
state office, so
don't.
so I've been waiting for my invite for the 25-year reunion, but I
Gosh.
haven't gotten it yet. They must have forgot about me. So, but anyway, I've hidden from it because I think
Yeah.
we sort of have this, like, there's almost this unwritten, unspoken idea that we shouldn't have conflict,
Hmm.
right? Like there
Yeah,
shouldn't
and
be a
what
rub.
and I not to take us too far away from that, but I wonder what effect the last 5 years has had on that. Because
Mm-hmm.
since we haven't spent as much time in person, and I think we're
Mm-hmm.
back to that, right? But I mean, because there was this time here we weren't in person, conflict looked and felt differently.
Mm-hmm.
And when
Sure.
you're not in person, you may just not deal with certain things, right? Because I can literally just go off camera or go off mic, or I can. And so, in some ways, I wonder if, as just again, big culture,
Yeah.
we aren't as adept at dealing with conflict as maybe we were. And this last 5 years has changed how we approach that a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but right, when we don't deal with it and if we hide from it, it's just gonna come back to bite us a little
Yeah.
bit bigger, in the end. You're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What have you done? I mean, if I can turn the tables on you, right? Like, what have you done to make sure that you're not unintentionally like hiding from that you're not,
Yeah.
that you're willing to face anything that comes through?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'll speak to all the men out there because I know I can
Yeah.
speak to the men and the husbands of the world. If you find yourself in that category, which I'm willing to bet is about 80% of the people listening. Um, so just knowing the industry, knowing who we're talking to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So men are professional hiders. I mean, whereas most men, I'm not going to throw everybody into the bus with where I've been or who I've been, but it's just and it's not. And by the way, it's well intended, right? Because often men at least don't want those around us. We don't want our wives or our kids or even our coworkers or especially employees on our teams maybe knowing how much weight we're carrying or how much that thing that
Mm,
was said impacted us, right? Because it's almost like, well, we shouldn't be feeling those feelings of anger, angst, anxiety, shame, guilt, fear, etc. The things, kind of the lower level, vibrations that we we sort of walk around in, a lot of
yeah.
us, right? And so what most men do is they shoulder it and then they stuff it. And until it becomes action, until something happens or there's a scenario where they can finally unpack that,
Hmm.
it just gets carried around and gets stuffed away, and eventually comes out as procrastination. Sometimes, other times it comes out as cynicism,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so all of those things, once they stack and they stack and they stack long enough with the right people and the right scenarios present themselves, that's when the storm comes. The
Hmm.
required storm that could have been avoided have if we would not have, if we would have just said, hey, like if we would have just addressed it at the onset, right?
Yeah. Well, and if I may speak for all the women of the world, which I cannot, okay, I cannot, but let's just say I
Sure.
could. We need for the men in our lives to acknowledge those pieces going along, because we all know that women carry so much of the mental load, right? Of
Mhm.
households, of families, of work. Like, we carry a lot of that mental load, and to know that the men in our lives are also shouldering things, gosh, whether that's a family relationship, a work relationship, whatever that is, when we can feel like we're in this together, right?
Mhm.
And we're not operating in these isolated silos where I'm carrying all these things and she's carrying these things and he's carrying these things. When we know what we're all carrying, and that doesn't mean that in the workplace we've got to share all of our personal stuff, but I just
Mm.
mean, gosh, if
Yeah.
it can go a long way to know that we're not alone in that. But also, Mark, I relate to that a lot because, again, because of the way I'm wired, I've become quite the professional at hiding from my feelings.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think a lot of us do.
Yeah.
And we all process it different. Men and women process
Yep.
things differently. We're
Absolutely.
wired together differently. God made us that way. Thank goodness. And it just, there are healthy ways and unhealthy ways. So this is
Yeah.
a side note, sort of, but just worth
Yeah.
mentioning. Number one for me, most painful journey I've ever been on is just getting to the point of knowing that, right? And it just literally took
Yeah.
my heart getting completely stomped on, crushed enough, right? So that my ego would die off enough so God could go in, right? And once that
Hmm.
finally happened, like real transformation and real change took place. And what you see and experience now is a very different experience than you would have been receiving 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that's been a very necessary part of my journey to be able to do the work that we're doing today and be able to say those things and be able to finally speak to men. Like,
Hmm.
hey, like, listen, dude, like, I know I can see what you're carrying. Right. And the thing is, like, now I see it now. So my job is just to curate experiences where they actually can, like, notice it and hopefully unpack it in some way, shape, or form. So more to come on this. We have a new project, new program that'll be launching next year around the whole unpacking concept. That will not necessarily be ag specific, but will be specific towards men, middle-aged men going through the carrying, the shouldering of all the things, which most of the leaders that are in our programs right now, and we have a lot of them, we have over 200 people in coaching actively as we speak in our programs. And just the other day, somebody signed up for a webinar that my wife was holding on relationship focus. And because he was making fun of the fact that we were having a relationship focused webinar, right? I thought these guys were ag guys. I thought they were ag coaches. They're, ag business coaches. And then his wife said to him that she's like, well, it's funny that you're making fun of it because I'm thinking about getting a divorce.
Ooh.
And thank God, because it
Oh.
forced the conversation. And they actually got on
It.
the webinar together
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah.
Right. But those kind of things, like, I know at least 3 or 4 times last year, it just happened to John Anderson, one of our coaches, that
Yep.
coaching clients would schedule one-on-one time with him and say, hey, like, my wife just left. I thought it was fine. Same thing this guy said the other day. He's like, I thought it was fine. So I thought everything was good.
And how different could that be if men in their personal lives, in their marriages, were willing to be more vulnerable about that, more open with that with their spouses?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very, very.
And
Yeah.
and you're right, that's so hard. It's so hard.
Mm-hmm.
But what could be different in a marriage if you were willing to be really open with your spouse about the things you're struggling with and feeling, because they don't need you to be perfect. They
Yeah.
just want to share that with you,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Ugh.
By the way, go
Mm-hmm.
back, rewind 30 seconds. What Marlene just said, that. Right. You're like, you hide from it because you don't want to burden her, yet at the same time she wants to share the burden with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She just wants to know what the heck's going on with you,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And she wants to talk about that with you. And as you know, again, every woman is wired a little differently, so I cannot speak for everyone, but I
Mm-hmm.
know that often the real challenge in any marriage, of course, in conversations between spouses is, and BJ and I have gotten better about this, but it's sort of like it's that little thing, it's that little trick that's so easy. Do you just want to be heard right now, or do you want someone to help you find a solution? Right? And sometimes I think we don't open up to our spouses more because you're like, you're in a time where you're like, I just want to be heard. My spouse isn't willing to just hear me. My spouse always wants to fix it. And
Yeah.
sometimes you don't want to be fixed.
Yeah. You just need to talk.
So you don't share because you're like, you know,
Yeah.
and that's really tough for me because of course I hear anything that could have well, I could just fix that by doing X, Y, or Z, and so I just want to go into action.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not what my spouse or my friend or my coworker or my whoever, right? Sometimes people just want to be heard, and that takes a lot of that takes that can take a lot of growth too.
It does, yeah. And by the way, I mean you don't have to take this as a relationship podcast today. Like you have these relationships going on inside your teams all the time.
Yeah.
From an intentional leadership perspective, it behooves you to sit down and just recognize that there are people on your team going through other real life things. It's just statistically, let's look at it. It's probably 50 to 60% of the people in any given organization have some sort of relationship conflict or relationship issue happening.
Yeah, and also sometimes at work it can be as simple as, and I say simple. I know nothing's ever really simple, but it might be as simple as someone on your team really just needs to vent how frustrated they're feeling with something at work about a process or a system or how a project is going, and they know what they need to do next, but they really just need someone to sit with them in the frustration they're feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and then they can move on, right? And as teammates, sometimes that's what we can provide the best of. As a manager, sometimes that's what I can provide the best of, to be like, yep, I hear you, and I hear you that this is frustrating. And I just want you to know I'm in this with you, and this is frustrating. And yet we're going to have to move through the frustration. But as long as we feel like we're not alone in that,
Yep.
it feels a lot better, right? So you're right. The relationship sometimes is at home, sometimes it's with family, and sometimes it's just those relationships at work too, and in hearing people. And that goes a long way in the relationships and the bonding we have with our team members, isn't it, when we can share what we're feeling like as well, not just
sure.
are we making the quotas, have we sold the seats, have we done all the things.
Yeah, big time. Now I want to
Yeah,
go to the last question on the list that I sent you on this
sure.
topic, sort of, because it can become like you're the boss, so maybe not the relationship counselor. So how do you hold this, like from whatever perspective you have on this? You know, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be professional, but just from what you've seen in life experience. Like we know that creating an environment within which people can be vulnerable is important from a leadership perspective. I think we both agree
Mm-hmm.
on that to an extent. But how do I do that without being involved in the dirty laundry?
Mm.
Right? Like how do I, without having to
Yeah.
with maybe to be able to hold the space, but not be the fixer of that
Yeah.
person's problems, and still at the end of the day say, I hear you. That sucks. Right. And we also got work to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Can I phone a friend? I don't know how
Yeah.
many people listening remember, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and you
Yeah.
had the
Right.
option to phone a friend.
Yeah.
But because this is hard.
It
I
is.
think this is really hard, and this is something that I'm constantly asking myself: am I being supportive enough? But also, am I serving the role that my team needs me to serve? And
Yes.
how am I dancing on that line? And sometimes I might not get that right,
Yeah.
and so I'm not always going to get it right, and then I'll have to figure out what that
Yeah.
piece is.
Yeah.
And I think something I keep coming back to is that when I'm trying to figure out how do I balance that and walk that line, if I'm going to err one way or the other, I'm going to err into relationship support. And so if I'm gonna mistakenly lean too far one way or the other, I'd rather mistakenly lead into the relationship support. Um, and also, I've mentioned my Clifton strengths, and how I'm wired.
Mm-hmm.
One of my lowest themes is empathy. Now, I care about
Same.
people a
You and
lot,
me both.
right? I care about people a lot, but
Yeah.
I don't always. I never. I rarely feel the feelings of the room. I can recognize the feelings of a room, but I'm not going to also internally feel that energy.
Mm-hmm.
So I recognize that for me as the manager, in terms of how to walk the line of relationship support and also leading someone through a scenario, that I'm not typically in the danger of
Mm-hmm.
going too far into that relationship support, because I'm one of my lower talents is empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And So Mark, I don't even know that I answered your question other than
Yeah.
it's a constant kind of back and forth, right? You're
Yeah.
looking at, am I on the right side of that?
Well, and in some ways you did though, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
really just having, being in the space, have the conversation, recognize your strengths and weaknesses in this
Yeah.
category. And if being someone's relationship counselor is not, but being their manager is, then be a human,
Right.
right? Be a
Ab-
human, like,
yep.
hold the space or give them some time or recommend they take a half day or a day, right? To
Yeah.
go, go work on themselves and then let that be okay. Like get the stuff that would normally be on their plate in as much as is possible handled for them,
Yeah. It
like
absolutely.
defend them a little bit.
Yeah. And there's so I still do some speaking and training on the side as
Yeah.
well, in addition to my work with Farm Bureau. And one of the keynote programs that I have really looks at how do we show up for people.
Hmm.
And I like to use these stories of some of the adventures I've been on with my friend Susan, who lives in Colorado, one of my college roommates from Ohio State.
Hmm.
And and I've got these fun examples of how, like, on these adventures we've been in, like what she did to support me in different scenarios. But as we look at what the real life applications of those are, it's just what you said. Sometimes people are in crisis, and what they really need is someone to pick up the ball for a little bit. And we've
Yeah.
all been there. And especially, this is the podcast of listeners who work in agriculture or with folks who work in production agriculture, whatever. We've got a real mental health crisis with folks
Yeah.
in production ag, and that's something I want to be constantly aware of, right? And so I'm not just talking about a mental health crisis, but sometimes people are in crisis and we've got to be able to pick something up for them. Other times people need some real hard encouragement, right? It's like, I'm not going to do this for you, but I know that you can, and I'm going
Mhm.
to push you to do it. Other times, what people need is, I see you're in a hard spot, and also I see that you're working really hard, and I just want you to know I'm in this with you, right?
Mhm.
They don't need you to pick it up. They don't really need the hard encouragement. They just want to know that, like, somebody sees them and they're going to do it with them. And I think the more mature and healthy you can be as a leader, the more you can, and the more you know your people,
Yep.
the more you recognize that in different situations, what do people need in that moment?
Yeah.
Um, while also being willing to step up and be the manager, be the leader. Just yesterday, my team was having a meeting. We were planning out some different things, and I joked, I'm like, "Well, I'm not in charge here." And someone on the team kind of laughed, and they said, "You are kind of in charge here." And I was like, as in, it was sort of like, "We need you to be in charge here, right?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, "You're right. Okay, you're right. I do need to be in charge of some things, but this is not a dictatorship."
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was a good reminder that, oh, in some situations, that is my job, right? My
Yeah.
job is to be the quote unquote in charge here, and be
Right.
willing to do the hard thing to help, like, lead people through what might be a tough situation that they're figuring out for themselves as well.
Yep.
So,
Yep. As you're saying that, I'm reminded of my dad used to have a saying when I was a kid, and it was, everybody around here has a say, but there's only one vote.
I love it. Yeah.
And
It's like, yeah,
I
that's
think
right.
about that often because, I mean, decisiveness is one of my strengths,
Yeah.
and but detail is not. So I need you to bring me the details and help me think through the pros and cons,
Yeah.
but then I can make the decision really quickly,
Yep.
but we don't always need a committee to make a decision. We just need information and
Yep.
look at the ups, look at the downs, manage risk, and like, let's go. So, but anyway,
I love that. I love that everyone has a say, but there's one vote.
there's only one vote. I mean, most, when you really look at it, I mean, an organizational structure, I mean, if you have a chief executive officer of some kind or a
Mm-hmm.
general manager, that is the way an organization
Mm-hmm.
is structured. It is not a democracy, right? Everybody has input, but
Mm-hmm.
that's at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
one person's head is on the plate, is on the
Yeah,
table, is on the stake if things don't get done
that's
correctly,
right.
right? And so, out of respect, that is how we've structured ourselves, because we are actually, as humans, quite comfortable operating in a system where there's one person at the end of the day who's deemed responsible. And eventually,
Mm-hmm.
if we don't like them enough, we will get rid of them. Don't worry, but that's also how we're wired. So,
Well, and
anyway,
so,
okay.
right, it's being willing then that if you're part of a small team, that role might fall to you, right? If you're the manager of a
For
small
sure.
team, and you've got to be willing to step up and say, okay, there are situations where
Yeah.
I have to be the one vote for my team. I've got to take the blame or the credit, for this, if this doesn't go well, or
Yeah.
I have to be willing to step up and help my people through this because it's my job to do that, even if it's uncomfortable.
We're,
But
I think it's
yeah,
Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last,
yeah,
that really addresses that
yep,
very thing. Like we're happy to do the thing and take care of our leaders and put them on a pedestal and recognize them. And we talked about this with someone recently. I was actually on a coaching call because there was a changeover in leadership, and they're like, "This is our fourth person leading the team in this role in the last 2 years."
mm,
Right. And so and there's, there's 60 people in this division and in this
yeah,
business unit, and we're working with all of them from a coaching perspective. And, so there's frustration. Right. And they're like, well, what do I do with this? I said, well, I don't know what you're going to do with it, but here's something that I often think about. I said, there was a time and a place in America where we used to pray for our leaders. Like families would go home and have dinner as a family at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. And they would sit there and, and they would bless the meal, but they would
hmm
also pray for their boss or pray for their
hmm
company or pray for their CEO.
yeah,
And this is where I want to bring America back to those days. Like we're far too quick to just jump on X, jump on Facebook or TikTok and make a reel or a post, right, about what someone's doing wrong or what
hmm
leaders are doing incorrectly. And I just think like we can get back to that place where we actually like, hey, I want what's best for my family, which is for my company to be succeeding.
yeah,
Therefore, I'm going to take
yeah,
time to send them a nice note, send them some gratitude, do some of these things. And of course, like if somebody's not doing the job well, of course. But anyway, what I told the coaching
yeah,
client was what I would be doing right now is my job first and foremost, as to the best of my ability.
yeah,
And I would be
yeah.
reaching out to the new guy and saying, hey, welcome to the team. How can I support you?
I realize it does. I keep nodding, and that doesn't make for great audio as people are listening. That I'm just nodding over here. I'm like,
No,
yes, yes,
no.
yes. There should be a sound that you can hear me nodding my head. But
That'd be funny. So anyway, I think, that's one of the things that comes to my mind, as we talk about, edifying leaders and knowing, that like back, like my dad used to say, there's only, everybody can have a say, but there's only one vote. Somebody's ultimately responsible for this group, this team, this business, this
mhm,
company, organization
yeah,
at the end of the day. Okay. This went like a completely different direction than I anticipated us going. So, and I love it because it's been fire. But let's do a quick speed round. So I want people to get to know
sure,
you, some things that
great.
you have to share. Favorite book on leadership?
Oh, Uh, I even knew this question was coming, and I remember thinking, "Oh, I don't know how to answer it." I'm going to say this. This may be a cliche answer, but it's one that I share with rising leaders often,
Mm,
and that is John Maxwell's book on the 5 levels of leadership, because I think
yeah,
it's such a great framework for thinking about how true influence is really built. And if you've not thought about
yeah,
leadership as influence, it can be a really great entry point with something that feels pretty tangible and tactical.
beautiful. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. John Maxwell is the goat. Uh,
Yep.
what's been the toughest thing you've had to overcome in the last bit of your career? We've had some ups and downs together over the years that I've maybe not together, but that we've observed of each other. So what's been one of the most challenging for you?
Yeah, I'm going to mention the most challenging transition. It was a good one, but a challenging one. And that was making this big transition from working for myself for a
Mm,
decade to going back to working full time for an organization. And I'm going to give a shout out to Tad Nicholson, my previous boss, who believed in me enough, and we had a good enough relationship that he is a great example of how when you know you're going to hire someone who's going to go through a big transition, being willing to like he really showed up for me and checked in with me and made sure that that was going really well.
mhm.
I really owe him for that. So that was a really big challenge, but with the right leader in place, like it went okay. And yet it was a tough transition. And it was a big one, but one I've been grateful for. And I think I came out on the other side of it in a much better place and having learned a lot about myself through it.
Good. It's good.
Yeah,
It's challenging. I'm still self-employed technically, but I'm also now the
sure.
co-founder, not the founder, not the
Uh huh.
CEO. I'm the chief evangelist. That's my title now, like, which is a
Yeah.
fancy way to say sales guy. And so, and do the podcast, make it known, let people know who we are.
Yeah. And so
And
your
so
role your role has changed too in that.
big
Yeah.
time, big time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm bouncing decisions off of, Christine as
Hmm.
the other co-founder, off of John, who's been with us now for a decade,
Yeah.
he's in it to win it with us as well. So yeah, it's a very, very different culture than a decade ago. Okay. What's been the biggest win?
Boy, it's not often, Mark, that I'm at a total loss for words. Just ask my brothers. But um, I'm I'm going to say, I think, to go back to that, I think one of my biggest wins was making the jump
Mm,
from self-employment to working for someone full-time, because it was such a big transition.
yeah.
And so having the right people around me and going through that experience and trying to be really intentional with how I set up some things there. I mean, I'd go back and do some things differently, but ultimately feeling I felt successful enough in that, like, okay, this is going to work and I can do this.
Hmm.
And that felt like a really big win, because I honestly wasn't sure when I made the leap if it was going to, I thought it would work out, but you never really know. And so when it did, that felt really good.
Yeah. Beautiful. I like it.
Yeah.
Like that a lot. Man, as you look toward the next year, 24 months, 36 months, what's on the hot plate for Marlene's personal development? Where do you want to grow or grow into?
Yeah. So I like I said, I've had the privilege of joining this team where I get to lead this team that has three other folks on it. And I'm really excited over the next year and 2 years for us as a team to continue to mesh together and to really set some kind of like up level our goals for all of the programs that we've been leading. It was so fun to come into Farm Bureau into a role where there wasn't anything that needed fixed. Like, all the programs were in a really great shape. My predecessor, Melinda Witten, had done an awesome job in this role for more than a decade
Mhm.
and moved on to another really awesome opportunity. And so it's so fun to come into this opportunity going, oh, there's nothing that needs fixed. Nothing's wrong here. And I get the chance now to, with this team, go, okay, and now we can take these things to the next level. What do we want that to look like? So
Mhm.
I think it's really fun for us over the next couple of years to go, okay, what's the next version of these programs look like? What's the next vision? And what could that look like as we serve Farm Bureau members in Ohio? So for me, that's really, really, really exciting to think about. Also, I'm a maximizer. So
Am
naturally,
I?
that's how my brain is working, right? To think about
Yeah,
those things. And I feel lucky to be in that spot. So
that's awesome.
that'll be what we kind of focus on and think about, I think, for the next couple of years.
Beautiful. Any particular program? I know a lot of people in Ohio that listen. So, are there any programs that people should be paying attention to coming up in the next year that we can look into that we should know about?
Well, I always want to promote my favorite one, which is the one I get to lead directly. It's called AgriPower. It's the 12-month Leadership Development Academy for Ohio agriculture's
Hmm.
rising leaders in all sectors. And the next class will launch this December. So, as this podcast comes out, the applications window will be open soon. Check into that. Of course, if you go to ofbf.org, you can always
Yep.
search for things and find that. Or if my contact information or anything is listed here with the show notes for the podcast, I mean, reach out
Hmm.
to me and I'd love to just tell you more about that program opportunity in Ohio, whether it's for you or someone on your team or
Yeah.
someone in your organization. It's a 12-month program that I'm really proud of and really privileged to get to work with.
Good. Good. Yeah, I'm thinking about some folks at
Yeah.
Sunrise or Mercer,
Yes.
um, or the Andersons or some of these guys. I know that we have people from all those
Absolutely.
companies that listen to the podcast, so I'm just doing a couple shout outs to some of our
Please
clients and
send it
leaders.
my way. We'd love to have you. Love to have you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Marlene, this has been fun. Thanks for coming on
Thank
the show.
you.
You bet.
Thanks so much.